Ah, I see how it is. NECA makes a Godzilla in 1954. So of course SC's Monsterarts makes in 1954.
Well, yeah, somebody's gotta show you whippersnappers how it's done.
Oh! Shut up, GMK, nobody likes you.
But I thought everybody liked me.
You know, for being such a scary looking Godzilla, you sure do cry more than people that went to see the 98 Godzilla movie. Anyways, back to the task at hand. You were just scared that my company finally made a good Godzilla figure, and you just couldn't handle that.
You said a good figure? That's still debatable.
Guys, calm down. Can we all just like the figures that we want to like? No! Hey guys, welcome to Super Important Reviews. My name's Steve, and today we're going over the SC's Monsterarts Godzilla 1954 from Bandai and Tamashii Nation. If you guys don't know which Godzilla this is, and that's kind of shame on you, but anyways, just kidding. But he is from the original film Godzilla. You also might know it as Godzilla with Raymond Burr or Gojira, which I do prefer the Japanese version, but the Raymond Burr one still kind of has its own merits. I'm rambling. Anyways, he's from the original Godzilla film in 1954. It was a black and white film, which is why the figure is done in a black and white style. And is a film that is widely considered a masterpiece in the kaiju community and just in films in general. It is that good. If you guys haven't seen it, definitely recommend going to check it out. And especially the Japanese version, because that film is freaking haunting as all hell, and I definitely recommend giving it a look. Which is actually why I picked up this figure, because I do really love the 1954 suit, and then I just love Monsterarts in general, so anytime they put out a new sculpt, I just generally tend to snag those guys up. And I do have a lot of representation of this guy in my collection with Bandai vinyls, Bear model. I don't have an X-Plus of this guy, sadly. Odd. But I do also have the NECA version, which we will compare in this video. I won't go hardcore over each individual little detail, but I will give you guys my pretty much opinions on where both of these figures lie in your collecting. And I'm just really excited to get this guy out of his cardboard prison. Well, actually, I kind of already got him out a little while back, but he needs to be released again. So, without further ado, for his packaging, really love the overall appearance on the front. I actually think it has this really nice foreboding kind of haunting atmosphere with the black in the background with the figure right here. Looks really awesome. It's a very contrasting image here, especially with the slashes, and you can see the figure on the inside. With also just having very mild colors with the bright red here with the Godzilla 1954, Bandai Tamashii Nation. Side of the box, you get Godzilla in a nice frontwards position. Top of the packaging, got it upside down by Monsterarts Godzilla 1954. Other side, not too much else going on that we haven't previously seen. And for the back of the packaging, you just get Godzilla in some dynamic poses, getting ready to stomp on some military vehicles, some stuff I can't understand, and some legal mumbo jumbo, but you get another picture of Godzilla looking up here at the bottom, which is actually kind of neat to say the least, because this is the part of the packaging that you're not going to really be seeing, and it even has this nice little glossy shine to it. So that's pretty cool. So let's get this guy open up out of his cardboard prison. Alright, so now that we have Godzilla open up out of his cardboard prison, he's decided that he needs to take a nap. Because this is the lazy Godzilla in my collection, I guess. And I think it's actually really cool you can get him in this little laying down position like he's affected by the oxygen destroyer. Or maybe he's actually swimming around in Tokyo Bay, getting ready to do some Jaws actions for you. Actually, no, I'm just gonna get this guy to stand up for us, because our King of the Monsters needs to be up and raring and ready to go to take out Tokyo. But for this kaiju, he comes with 0 accessories, which is a little bit of a bummer, because I would have really liked to have seen some kind of breath effect for this guy. Now, I kind of understand why he doesn't come with one, because the way his mouth is designed, with his teeth, he has these fangs on the front here, which I'll show you guys in a little bit closer detail in just a sec. But I imagine that would get in the way of a breath effect a lot. No, they probably could have worked it out to actually have it just kind of like come out of his mouth like in a cone. Would have been really cool. Or maybe even just gave us a reissue of the 64 Emergence version breath. Maybe with just a little bit of a different color scheme. That would have been fantastic for this figure and gave it a little bit more variety than what we got with the NECA release of the 54. But with the GMK and most standard Godzilla releases that we get, usually the first one doesn't come with anything, so it's understandable. But we're going to move into a closer look at his details. So first we'll go over the Big G's face here, which overall I really like the sculpt for the head. I think that they did a really fantastic job with what they had here. With his slightly elongated ears, really like the trademark brow of the 54. His nose looks really nice. Really like his downward glancing expression, which translates pretty well from the movie. It looks really good from the front. But the only thing I'm noticing with mine is this eye is looking a little bit more down than my other one. Like this one is more of like a standard expression, like this is how I expected and more reminiscent of the film. Well, the other one is starting to go into his face, which is odd. But it's not so bad because when you're looking at it from the front, it doesn't look that bad to be honest, and it's actually fairly reminiscent of what you see in the film. So overall, still works pretty well for me. The only thing I find weird is that he looks like he's kind of grinning. Like something's a little bit funny. Because it's just the way with the curvature of his face on this guy. He just seems like he has like this little, like, not so serious expression. Like he is very glad that he's going to be going to demolish Tokyo. And I just kind of think it's more of an adorable expression that he has going on with this guy. I don't know why. It's just, I can't really take his face that seriously. Like, if you have his mouth open, which on mine is kind of stiff, you actually get him roaring pretty well. And when you have his mouth open, it's not so bad. Like, this is actually a little bit more terrifying looking. But when you have it closed, yeah. But opening it back up real quick, just so you guys can see the little bit of detail I was talking about earlier. With this giant fangs on the front of his mouth, which, just like in the film, looks really good. You also got to see that on the NECA version as well. And I really like the sculpting for the teeth on the inside too. And then he has his little tongue on the inside. But one thing to point out, because you might notice that there's no bone coloring, no white going on, the tongue isn't red, because his overall paint job that he has going on is to replicate the black and white feel that you see from the film, because the film is done in black and white, so of course our kaiju is. Now, with the coloring scheme, it's not quite the same as what we got with the NECA, because the NECA is brighter grays and borderline a whitish gray on the dorsal spines here. While I feel with the paint job for this guy, it's more reminiscent of a lot of the shots that you see in the film because, for the most part, he's not very illuminated. So with the darker coloring for his scales and even with the dorsal spines here, it does help to replicate the feel of the film a lot, I feel. Which also translates with his mouth because his teeth are actually done in the same gray that you see on the dorsal spines. And even his tongue is a slightly... not the same gray as what's going on with his scaling, but it's definitely a darker shade than what we have here with the tongue on mine. Kind of the same as what we got with the pupils going on here, is more or less the same color as what we got with the tongue. So, overall, I like the head sculpt. The one thing I want to point out, though, with this, though, is for this guy, his head looks kind of small to me, at least in comparison to the film. Because with the suit actor, his head would be resting somewhere in the neck right here. And then you have his arms going into Godzilla's arms here. And then the body just kind of hanging off his body. And then the head sits right on top of his head, technically. And in the film, where his neck is, it's actually a fairly large head in comparison to his neck. While this Godzilla is very proportioned. So to me, this feels more like a more accurate representation of the kaiju in terms of the head sculpt, with the more equal proportions that you have with the rest of his body going with his head than what you get with the actual suit. So he has more of a little bit of a real world monster feel to me. Moving on to his neck, it is slightly elongated with actually a lot of detail going on here, because you can see some of the folds here in the neck where it's kind of contorting a bit, and then it has a little bit of a bulge actually on the more Adam's apple area of Godzilla here. And if you bring his head up even more, it definitely sticks out more. But if you don't want the Adam's apple portion sticking out, you just kind of bring down his head a little bit. And I noticed with the articulation too, is that if you adjust the head or the neck, the top section likes to kind of stick up a little bit. So you have to get it to rest flat to look good with Godzilla's overall head and neck lining. But the details do look really nice too. Same with the body. It's very form-fitting, because unlike the suit in the film, it's actually kind of floppy looking. Like it hangs off the body a little bit and has more squared edges. While the figure here actually is fairly compressed, and again, very proportionate to what I would expect to look from a monster. And same with the arms here too, look really nice. No paint job on the nails though, is something to point out in this guy. But there is a little bit of detail on the inside of the palms, looks really good. Overall, no paint job on the nails isn't really that big of a deal, because with Godzilla scratching his way through buildings and other things in the film, kind of expect the paint to wear eventually, so it kind of translates pretty nicely on the figure here. And also to point out, towards his abdomen region, At least on mine. There's a little bit of a brighter gray here on the stomach area, and it kind of gives him this little bit of a weird lighting going on right there. But it does give him a little bit more color variety on his body too, because without these little subtle, slightly light gray splotches you kind of see here and there, it'd be a very stagnant looking body color scheme. So I do actually really like that. It gives him some nice highlights. And then moving on to his dorsal spines. I actually really love the dorsal spines in this guy. Look very proportionate for what you see in the film, and I really love the cockeyed angles that they're going on. And they have the overall right proportioned shapes. And it kind of looks weird too, because there's this gap here. But that isn't really that actually far off, because even in the film, his dorsal spines aren't really very even. Because it is the first Godzilla suit, so there is going to be some weird little inconsistencies here and there. So with that said, I do really actually think these look nice, and I actually like what they did with the coloring on it, because it's not super bright to be very distracting, but it does have enough standout paint job to give it a little bit of variety with the rest of the body. And even with the tip of the dorsal spines here, they're actually slightly brighter than what you get for the inner sectionings of the spines. There's a lot of nice bumps, grooves, and ridges on the inside of the dorsal spines to give each of them their own little individual characteristics and variety. Has overall 3 dorsal spine platings, but there is some semblance of a 5th row on this one. You can see it a little bit on the outside, but it's not painted on this figure. And it definitely fades off once you get towards the base of the tail, and then it just becomes the 3 dorsal spines running out through the rest of the tail. Which the tail is actually really cool in this guy, just like the GMK. Very posable. Really likes to hold the articulation when you're bending it, which I think is really nice. And the details on it are actually pretty freaking awesome. The one thing that's slightly odd is for this portion of the tail right there, you can see that the spine actually extends on here instead of being on this little plate here. Which kind of works out, because if you want to have it articulating, it kind of makes sense. But when you go to straighten the tail out, looks a little ugly. Another thing to point out on the bottom section of this Godzilla's tail, he does have consistent detail with the rest of his body, where on most of the other Godzillas you get that little rigid sections and it's slightly smoother on the undersection of the tail. And then finally, for his legs, look really nice as well. There's actually a lot of character going on here, because on this leg there's actually what kind of looks like scratches or a little groove lining going on over top of the thigh, and there's some folding of the skin here on the kneecaps, which you don't actually see on the opposite knee. But on the opposite one, you have some folding here on the undersection of the calf here, which looks pretty cool overall. And then we got Godzilla's feet with his 4 toes. Look really nice. And one thing to point out is they're actually painted. Unlike the nails on the hands, they actually have a little bit of a light gray brushing over top of it. And it even translates on a little bit of the toes here as well. So it's kind of odd that they painted those, but didn't actually paint the nails on his hands. Strange. And for his articulation, it's actually pretty impressive on this guy, where his head can look up about that far, down about that far, so you get a pretty crazy bend there. Can look that far to the left, that far to the right. His mouth can open and close, but on mine it is super stiff. You can get his mouth open pretty wide, but you have to arc his head up, so if you want him roaring, it actually looks really good. But his tongue is not actually articulated on this. It's actually fixed on the inside of his mouth, unlike what we saw with the GMK, which was actually articulated. And then for his arms, can go up about yay far, inwards about that far, can rotate all the way around. Has a pretty good elbow bend. Also, a little bit of rotation here at the elbow. His hand can rotate all the way around. Has a nice play on there, nice rotation. For his waist, can look a little bit side to side, but nothing too crazy. Also, be a little bit wary of the dorsal spines in the back here. I don't really notice anything going on too crazy that could cause some damage, but it's always something just to be a little bit wary of. And then he also has a little bit of a wiggle. And you can bend his body down about that far, so you can really extend the gaps on his back. But again, if you have him looking from forward angles, still looks really nice overall. It's just from the side, it's a little unsightly, but it's a figure of ball joints. There's going to be something that's going to be a little cockeyed with the figure. It's not going to be perfect. But really nice bend to it, especially with the head articulation too, going full on. That is really crazy looking down. Like he's really scoping out the cars, man. Then for his legs, can move outwards about that far, inwards about that far. Pretty decent forward kick. Really nice back kick. Has a little bit of a bend here at the knee. Nice little rotation at the knee. And for his feet, can also rotate side to side and have a little bit of a pivot to it. And it can move forward about that far, backwards about that far, and can also rotate here at the upper portion of the thigh. And again, his tail is on individual ball joints for each of these little segments until right here. And I noticed at the tip of my tail is where the ball joint on here really likes to pop off pretty easily. But right now it's not wanting to show it off. But this section right here is generally where mine pops off on here. But you do get a lot of play with the tail, which is really nice. And I really love the improved articulation we get for the tails for these guys. Unlike what we saw with the Spitfire 2014, where, especially on my show, they all just kind of lay flat, and that's just how it's going to be. So for some quick comparison, here we have the SH Monstars 1954 compared next to some Bandai Vinyl 1954s with the Japanese release and the Bandai Creations release. And here is compared next to some SH Monstars Godzillas with the newly released GMK Godzilla, who is a freaking beast of a Godzilla compared next to most every other Godzilla. Like, look how he dwarfs him. That's freaking insane. And the SH Monsterarts 1964, who I actually recently got autographed by Akira Takarada. So needless to say, got this guy out to grace your guys' view for this review, but now he's going back into his prison because we don't want to hurt this box anymore. Here's some other Bandai Tamashii figures: the SH Figure Arts Ultra Act Manga Ultraman Special Edition, and the SH Monsterarts Mechagodzilla 2 with Garuda, because he hasn't made his way back into my display case yet. So for the moment you guys have been waiting for, here he is, compared next to the NECA Godzilla 1954. Now you guys are probably wondering, what is my opinion on these? Which figure do I think is the better figure? Which, if we're going to compare apples to apples and do both of these guys on equal playing fields, of course the SH Monster one's better. Like, it's got more articulation, better sculpt, done by Yuji Sakai. It's from Japan. Like, there's everything, you got everything literally going on with this figure that is amazing. Granted, it's more money, but it's more money. You get more out of the figure because you're paying more for it. And for $20, of course, this guy is not going to be up to par as what we have here. Now, if we compare apples to, say, bananas, like we should be, because I don't feel like these guys should really be on the same playing field, because these two aren't essentially like, probably a good comparison would be third-party Transformers with Masterpiece Transformers. Because, for instance, there is a Masterpiece Megatron, and then we have a crap ton of third-party Megatrons that are trying to replace the Takara Megatron. Which, that, I could say you could easily compare the figures because they're all on the same playing field because they all want to be Masterpiece Transformers. Now, the NECA Godzilla here is not trying to be a Monsterarts figure. It's not trying to be in scale with any other Monsterarts figure going on. So it's not really fair to say that this guy is trying to compete with this guy. But then again, there's not like there's other monsters really compared to the 54 because he's the only one in the movie. So I can see most people just wanting a certain 54 to be in their collection. Which I do think there's merits to both of these guys being in your collection, because just as I stated, this guy's from a certain toy line, meant to go with other figures from that toy line. Same with this guy. But if you guys are just looking for a 1954 Godzilla to be in your collection, this is probably the best way I could say it. If you're looking for something fairly inexpensive, want something that is a little bit more suit accurate, because yes, I will say that my Band-Aid is falling off my finger, and that the NECA version is actually slightly more suit accurate with the larger head, the more loose form-fitting body, because you can see right here, it's definitely a lot more angled, like what you see in the film. And I think just in terms of size and scale, because he even is the slightly bigger figure, I think he just works better for a more suit representation of the kaiju. Except for he has a shorter tail and dorsal spines are slightly smaller than what you see in the movie. But overall, I think he replicates it pretty nicely. And he's only 20 bucks and pretty easy to acquire at most Toys R Us, FYEs, any place that really sells NECA action figures stateside. So if you guys don't like shipping in figures and don't want to spend too much money and want a nice suit accurate Godzilla, I'd say go for this guy, personally. But if you want a great representation of the Godzilla 1954, not saying suit, but just the kaiju himself, then I would say go with the Monsterarts one. Especially if you have more money, you can splurge on figures. Because this guy is the better sculpt, definitely has better articulation, and has really nice proportions in comparison to what the figure is going on with. So he's just a cleaner looking Godzilla, which is something you're going to expect out of the Monsterarts line. So if you guys are looking for just a good suit accurate Godzilla figure and want articulation, not spend a whole lot of money on it, go with the NECA one. If you guys want a really great representation of the 1954 Godzilla and really want super articulation and have a little bit more money to spend on your figures, go with the Monsterarts one. Pretty much easiest way to say it, buy what you want, buy what you love. So to conclude this review, which one do I personally prefer? Out of my preferences for what I'm looking for in a figure, I actually really like the SH Monsterarts version. Now, I know I said in the NECA 54 review that if SH Monsterarts put out a 1954 Godzilla, it's not needed. And granted, I still don't think that this figure is really needed, but since it came out, saying I'm really into the Monsterarts line, I'm gonna buy it anyways. And to be honest, I really love the articulation for this guy. It's definitely a step above what we got with the NECA version, even though the NECA version is still really nicely articulated. Of course, the Monsterarts one is definitely going to be the superb version. Really like the sculpt in this guy and like that he's a really good representation of the 1954 Godzilla. Might not be quite suit accurate, but still really awesome looking. Love the paint job on it, even though it has like one little hiccup with the eye. It's not a big deal. And I think it's just another great addition to the SH Monsterarts line. So if you guys are looking for a really nice looking representation of the 1954 Godzilla, want awesome articulation and have a little bit of extra money to spend, then definitely pick up the SH Monsterarts 1954 Godzilla before the Oxygen Destroyer removes them from the shelves. But what do you guys think? Have you guys picked up the SH Monsterarts Godzilla 1954? Which version of the 1954 movie do you prefer? Is NECA just more your thing? Please let us know in the comments. Look closer picture of this guy on Facebook. You want to click the link description below and help us defeat those kaijus by hitting that like button, subscribe, become a ranger today, and see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.
What do you make of that, Al? Godzilla!
Hey Rangers, welcome to Super Report Reviews. My name's Steve, and today I'll be going over the SH Monsterarts Godzilla 1962 from the film King Kong vs. Godzilla. We just put out the review of the NECA 62 not too long ago, which I figure is awesome. So hopefully this guy is up to par, because Monsterarts is easily one of my favorite toy lines to collect. And with the NECA being such a good figure as it is, and easily one of the best ones that they put out, hopefully this guy is going to keep up the trend of the Monsterarts being a little bit better than the NECAs, or well, actually pretty clear cut for the most part. So we're just going to get into it anyways. Main reason I picked this up is because it's just easily my favorite suit of all time. I know we'll never see a Kong. Just sort of like the NECA copyrights, you know, what have you. So it's kind of sad. Some company needs to just like make a gorilla that just so happens to look like the Toho Kong. That would be great. But anyways, without further ado, for the packaging's pretty standard stuff. It's kind of sad you can't see the figure inside of the package. We'll get into that in a bit because he's actually been unboxed, but it's something that would be nice for some of these guys, especially to inspect certain things. But you do get the Tamashii quality stamp on the front there. Little slashes on the cardboard. Opposite side of the package, Godzilla's 1962. Opposite side, you get him in a nice little front pose. Back of the package just shows him doing some poses, his breath effect, bunch of stuff I can't understand on the bottom, and some legal mumbo jumbo with the blue fin label. So anyways, it's going to open up out of his cardboard prison. Alright, so now that we got Godzilla open up out of his cardboard prison, first and foremost, we're going to go over his one accessory, which is his breath effect. Which, I do believe, because I don't actually own it, but I would have to look it back up. But I think this came with the dusty version of the 1964, which gives it more of a traditional looking atomic blast that shoots out of his mouth. I noticed though a lot of people are like, they're transitioning to calling these heat rays again, because they don't want to use the term atomic for this. But I'm going to call it atomic blast. It's just kind of what I've just been accustomed to, especially with the old Treadmasters and what have you. It's kind of more like an atomic ray, perhaps, but still really cool. Actually, pretty fitting compared to the Monsterarts one, which is more smoky looking, like more fiery smoke, and is definitely a hard white. This actually has some tinge of blue, which I actually personally like a little bit more. Arnez is more of a fan of this. But this just looks more accurate to the movie, and I just kind of like the condensed looking of the beam. Also comes with a Tamashii X stand so that you could hook to it, which just pegs in on this hole on the bottom of the stand. And just looking a little closer at it, this is a nice shade of really light baby blue coloring. You get a little bit of the white peeking through, and some little bit of effects to kind of make it look more like a beam. In front of it, it's got a little bit more white going on, but overall, pretty nifty little effect. And then for a closer look at Godzilla himself, one thing I'm gonna have to bring up, and I'm gonna have to bring it up now, mine has some fudged up teeth. As you can see, which is why I was kind of hinting at the beginning that it would have been nice to be able to actually see inside of the packaging to get at least some semblance of a look at the kaiju. Granted, it was shipped in, so that wouldn't really matter, but it's still a nice little thing to be able to do, especially if you have, with this guy being a Bluefin product, being able to actually look into it. Now, a lot of the web shop exclusives and stuff have the enclosed packaging, which is fine. That's why I know it's supposed to be a thing. But still, it'd be kind of nice, because that is something I'm going to have to definitely touch up on this guy now. And a lot of that, it shouldn't be a big issue, because he can't even fully close his mouth, so the teeth shouldn't really scrape. But for some reason, they kind of stopped carrying on the top section there. It also looks like the tongue's missing a little bit of paint there, too. But maybe not, because you can look at the roof and the mouth, like, it all kind of blends together. Because for the paint job for this guy, it's very subtle. The colors aren't quite as contrasting as what you see with the NECA, but one thing I want to bring up is the coloring is definitely more suit accurate. Because, for instance, you'll notice that the nails aren't really painted on this guy, which is correct for the movie. Because when you watch it, everything kind of blends with the suit outside of the dorsal spines. Same with on the toes here as well. For the eyes, what's really cool is that they're actually translucent plastic with yellow paint on the undersection, and then the actual like pupil is painted over top. So it gives it this really weird like glass eye effect, which is cool. It also hides the fact that mine looks like it's slightly Google, not a whole lot. Like you gotta kind of look, and the way that the eyes are designed, it helps to kind of hide that, especially looking at it straight on from the front, which is cool. Head sculpt looks really nice, very suit accurate, has that really Muppet kind of expression, especially with how clean the bottom of this jaw looks. Because when you watch the movie, there should be like a little bit of like an indent on the section here for the suit. It shouldn't be uniform, which definitely gives it more of that puppet kind of look. Something you'd see more on the 65 suits. Anyways, but tongue looks nice on the inside. I think it is separated, so you can articulate that a little bit. For the dorsal spines, there isn't a whole lot of paint on the top section. You get some semblance there at the top, but looks really nice. Definitely more accurate to the film than what you've seen on the NECA, with this spine here being a little bit shorter. I got a little paint missing right there, which is a little sad. Nothing too crazy. Some of that's to be expected. The teeth. Anyways, Looks like he needs to go to the dentist. Like he chewed on one too many boats or trains. Trains? Was it trains in the movie? Yeah. For how much I love this suit, it's actually been a minute since I've seen the movie. Opposite side looking pretty good as well. Which for the painting for the spines does look really nice. Kind of wish that they were a little bit more off-colored. I don't think they really needed to be brighter, but like looking at the X Plus and stuff, they got a little bit more of like a yellow tinge to it, which this one is more grayish. I guess you get a little bit right there. It's got a little bit of a yellow hue, but it's not very consistent between the other spines. And then coming down the tail, oh, that one's actually not painted at all. Stands out when you look at it. I guess the opposite side's got some paint on it. But it's in pretty well right there. Rest of the details coming down the neck, where you get a lot of the suit folds molded into the figure. And its chest, which isn't as smooth as what you've seen, like, because the NECA one came out previously, so I'm using that as a reference. But the scaling is definitely a different texture than what you see for the rest of the body, with the more traditional wrinkles. The stomach is, I don't know, it's kind of like sandpaper looking. You get that little ridge here for the chest here. It's got a little bit of a beer gut, which is correct for this Godzilla. He definitely was a little bit more of a plump boy. Legs look nice. A little bit on the hefty side, which is correct for the kaiju. Nails, well, looks like his foot's just like one solid toe. One thing I really wish they would have done with this for the paint job is gave it like kind of like a little bit of like a dirty wash over top of it, kind of like what they did with the Dusty version. But just like in certain areas, like the feet, the claws could have maybe used it, maybe had like a little bit, so it looks like he's been in a little bit of a battle. Because while the paint job is still fairly suit accurate, it's really bland looking. And maybe could have used a little bit more definition, especially when you don't have like the claws aren't going to be painted and the toes aren't going to be painted. I feel like there should have been a little bit more added just to help kind of make him stand out a little bit more on your shelf. Now you're just going to have a lump of charcoal gray on your shelf. And it would have been nice to have maybe like a little bit more of like some brown splashed here or there. And this is probably the first Monsterarts I've gotten since, like, I'm definitely going to touch up his teeth, because that's something standing on my shelf that's going to bother me hardcore. It's not like something like a little nick on the dorsal spines or something like that's kind of noticeable. So I'm going to have to touch that up. I might actually go over a dirty wash, and then up on our other channel, The Geek Chest, I might show me just touching him up a little bit. I might watch the movie a little bit more intently to try to match up him to maybe like a certain scene or something. But for the tail, pretty traditional Godzilla with your segmenting sections. Each of these are their own ball joints all the way up to here. Under section of the tail, you get that little bit more smooth texturing. Same with the bottom of his feet are kind of looks like he's been soaking it in the water a little bit too long. He's definitely got some wrinkling going on there. Godzilla needs to dry off a little bit. And then for the claws, it's weird to see, because some people, especially in the unboxing, were stating like the hands look like they're on run upside down. That's how it was for the movie. Like, especially like, I'll show them next to the X Plus, but the X Plus has the same thing going on with it. And it's just, like, Godzilla's got some weird hands, because he's a kaiju. He's a mutated creature, so it's perfectly fine. But other than that, like, the sculpt is really awesome for this guy. I just kind of wish they maybe would have done a little bit more with the paint, just to kind of make him stand out a little bit more. That and the QC issue, especially with, like, the painting on the teeth, shouldn't have happened. For its articulation, head can look up by that far. And sadly, not that far down. Like, you gotta work that. Like, that's really about it. Like, you get a lot up, but not too much down. Like, with the body, you get a lot more motion using the joint down here, which you actually get quite a bit there. Arm can go up with that. And then he's got a boop. Got too much of a wiggle for his neck. You get a little bit of a wiggle here for the neck. Same with the top section of the head as well, and a little bit of a rotation. Not too much there though. For his arms can go up about that far. Inwards about that far. Get a little bit of a rotation. As you can see, really nice forward and back for the shoulder joint. So decent amount of play there. Decent bend at the elbow. A little bit of rotation at the elbow. Rotation at the hand. Can also pivot forward and back. Side to side. Feels like it's on a ball joint. Not too much of a wiggle at the waist, but again, really nice forward and back. No real rotation. Legs can go outwards about that far. Inwards about that far. And gotta work the kick. About that far forward. About that far back. Yeah, not too much forward and back. Pretty decent bend here at the knee. No real rotation. Feet can rotate a little bit side to side. Forward and back motion as well. And the tail again, each of these are ball joints, so you get a lot of play with the tail. And you can go side to side as well. Plus what's nice too is that the joints hold the pose for the tail very nicely as well. Alright, so I'm going to spend a slight bit of time here for this comparison, and for our first one we have them next to the X Plus 30cm 62 and the NECA 62. Which again, I feel like, using this to point out, that this one easily the most suit accurate looking of the two. Of course, X Plus. And you can see with the paint job, a lot of the same similarities. While this one, green tinge, it's got painted nails. Not quite what you see with the suit, but as you can see, still, there's a lot here for your eyes to catch when standing on your shelf. And the same with this guy, not just because he's big, but you can see here he's got like little dirt spots everywhere on him as well. And I kind of wish that SH Monsterarts would have done the same with this guy. And as you can see, he's actually the smallest of the three and the second most expensive. So it would have been nice to maybe have seen a little bit more going on with him in terms of a color variety on the figure, but still holds up pretty well in comparison. Alright, with this comparison I got a little bit of a dilemma, because here he is with the Mezco and the SH Monsterarts King Kong, which Peter Jackson and from Skull Island, and you can see doesn't scale very well with these. Like, that sort of works. Granted, he looks a lot more realistic than this one. So that's why I liked him actually next to the NECA one. In terms of just having like a Godzilla and a Kong be able to fight. Like, they're both stylized a little bit and they work pretty well, but with him being very suit accurate, doesn't really work as well for me. And here's next to some SH Monsterarts figures with Shin Godzilla and Godzilla 1964, which again has a little bit more going on here in terms of color variety. Granted, didn't need the paint nails, but as you can see, they dusted this figure a little bit. This isn't even like, this is the original release. Again, would have been nice to have seen the same thing going on with this. And here is some other Showa Monsterarts figures with the Mechagodzilla 1974 and Godzilla 1954. And here is next to some Bandai vinyls with Hedorah Final Form and Gorosaurus. And here is next to some SH Monsters Alien vs Predator Requiem figures with the Warrior and the Wolf Predator standard version that are currently on loan from a subscriber. So overall for the SH Monsterarts Godzilla 1962, this figure is I'd say pretty run-of-the-mill for the SH Monsterarts figures. Articulation's amazing, sculpt is amazing. Just wish there was a little bit more going on with it with the paint, and with the paint hiccups that happened on mine. A little bit disconcerting, but for the most part, if the paint was solid for the teeth, I'd be pretty happy with this guy overall. So for this guy, I mainly would recommend this to you if you're a big fan of the 62 and really love SH Monsterarts, then I feel like you won't be disappointed. But if you only really want like one good 62 and you want to save as much money as possible, you're probably better off just getting the NECA for this one, because NECA one's really awesome, and I actually really like the paint job on it. Even though it's not quite suit accurate, it's still a lot more eye-catching than what the Monsterarts is. But I will say that I'm still very happy with this, and again, I'll do a little bit of a tutorial up over on our other channel once I get around to messing around with this paint. But what do you guys think? If you guys picked up the SH Monsterarts 62, what's your favorite version of Godzilla? Or is the NECA one just more you think? Please let us know in the comments. We'll closer picture of this guy up on our Facebook. You want to click the link in the description below. We also have a Patreon account, exclusive prints for the channel, and also a t-shirt shop down in the description as well. And help us defeat those kaijus by hitting that like button, subscribe, become a ranger today. See you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.
Where am I? What happened last night? Why does my head hurt?
Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave the set. We're trying to film my next movie. Wait, this is your movie? What happened last night? Woo! Take it off! Hey Rangers, welcome to Super Important Views. My name's Steve.
My name is Arnez.
And today we are going to be going over this SH Monsterarts Godzilla 1964. Now, I was planning on doing the Kyoto Evangelion figures. Did the entire review, started editing it, kind of turned out poopy. And that's mainly because I got a new camera and I'm trying to learn the kinks of it, and I kind of want to do that review in a little bit of a different format. So decided to put this guy out because I've had a few recent requests for this figure, and thought it'd be a nice quick video and fun one to do. So without further ado, for the packaging, what we have here is a nice image of the 1964 on the front. You don't get to see the inside of the packaging though for the figure, sadly. And most of the standard fare that you get to see on the Tamashii Nation boxes. For the top of the packaging, just get Godzilla 1964. Side of the packaging, more of that weird smoke effect thing going on. Other side of the packaging, nice image of Godzilla in black and white on the side here. Then for the back of the packaging, you just get him in some dynamic poses with some dust particles here on the bottom and some stuff I can't understand and some Lego mumbo jumbo. So let's get this guy open out of his cardboard prison.
Wait, before we start, I do have a question.
Okay.
Is that what the figure looks like?
Actually, I'm pretty sure that's the suit.
Because if that's what the figure looks like, we can judge this review right now.
I'm opening it. Alright, so now that we have good old 64 open up out of his cardboard prison, first we're going to go over his wide range of accessories, starting with absolutely none of them.
Wait, what?
He doesn't come with a single thing.
Really?
Yep, so this is all the Godzilla you're getting out of this packaging.
But Steve, you said I was going to do the accessories.
And moving on to the closer shots.
What?
So first we'll start with the head sculpt, which actually is really nice on this figure. I think they captured the overall look of the 64 suit pretty well, because you can see that on the lower section of his jaws, he has the little floppy jowl look that you see in the actual suit. You get his very predominant eyebrows. And also that weird little slightly glossy eyes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. What's up with that?
Well, in the movie, his eyes always kind of had a little bit of a fog to them, which is kind of like what they're conveying with the figure here. Especially on this side. Like, it's really hard to actually see the pupil on the inside of it without getting it under certain lighting. But it kind of gives him that, like, stoner appearance. Where he just looks super stoned all the time. But overall, I think it looks pretty good in terms of just the sculpt and detail. Like, I really like how they got the skin texture here on the side of the neck and the face. And pretty much throughout the rest of the body here, it looks really good as well. The only thing that's slightly weird, though, is because of all the joints. Right here, he's got like that little floppy skin sitting underneath the course of his head. And it just doesn't really sit right ever. Like, if you have his head down, he has some gapping on the top of his neck. If you lift it up, got some gapping on the bottom of his neck. So it just doesn't really ever sit flush.
You can't, like, push it in or anything like that?
No, and also his mouth cannot close at all. That's as far as it literally shuts.
Can you open it more?
Yep, once you open it up. Actually has a lot of very nice sculpted details on the inside of the mouth, though. Where the paint job is this really nice bone coloring with some blood red for the tongue. Looks fantastic. And then for the most of the rest of the figure's body, looks overall not too bad. Other than right here on the dorsal spines, you get a little bit of gapping. Which, trying to adjust them upright, that's about as good as it's going to get on mine.
It still looks weird.
It still does look a little bit weird, though. Which is one of the major concerns a lot of people have with this figure, because especially when you bend him down.
Oh.
Like, oh.
What happened?
There is not enough spine there to cover it. Which is going to happen. It's an articulated figure. It's sometimes when you want to pose it, it's not going to look exactly right. But then again, we have him looking from the front and then like hunched over. Still looks perfectly fine. Nothing too wrong. And then we have it upright. You got him looking from the side.
But Steve, your display case has a mirror in the back so you can see all of it.
Yeah. So that is a little bit of a problem that some collectors are going to have. And it's definitely probably one of the major eyesores on this figure. Especially since granted, how like much of a gapping they left here on the top part of the neck. I could have seen them easily just making the body section a little bit larger so that it could have just been able to enclose all the way. That wouldn't have really bothered me at all that much. Then for his body, overall, very unmuscular. Kind of like the original Godzilla, where he has that like old man body shape.
Wait, are you trying to say that there was a fat guy inside of that suit?
No. It's just he has a lot of extra layers.
You're saying it was a fat guy inside of that suit?
But the detail work on the body is actually pretty nice overall, other than this section right here is a little weird. The back section of his rear end sits over top of his thigh, and then also the front section here overlays the thigh as well.
Wait, that's not like part you can move?
Yeah, so this is actually an articulated joint, which does come out, but it's just super weird how they did that. Again, it increases the articulation, which is really nice, but then again, it just kind of gives him more seam lines on the side here. So on this figure, it's not quite as clean, but then again, without this section here, you won't get as much articulation. So
when did this figure come out?
2013, I want to say.
So it's not that old, right?
No, it's not super old, but it's something you're going to have to deal with these super articulated figures. And overall, it doesn't really bother me from certain poses. It's just looking at it from the side, a little bit unsightly. But the rest of the body sculpt is still very nice, where he has this charcoal gray paint job with a little bit more of a dusty green shade on the front of his chest here. Looks pretty good overall. Kind of wish I had the dusty version to compare this guy to. Which actually,
version of him?
Yes, there's a dusty version where he actually has the sand coloring on top of him, so it looks like he just rose out of the sand. And also came with an atomic breath. So the newer version actually came with more stuff.
So why did you buy this one instead of that one?
Because I've had this one for freaking ever, and I got him for Christmas.
Ah, touche.
Thanks, Jessica's mom. Then for his legs, sculpted very nicely, where it's very thin, just like you see in the film. And he's got a little bit of that more dusty paint job here on his kneecaps, so you could definitely tell he's been doing some work.
As everybody knows on this channel, that's like Steve's favorite thing. Got to get those kneecaps right, man.
Yep. Figures 0 out of 10 if that didn't have that little added paint job to it, man. It's unacceptable. And then he's got his weird three-toed feet.
What is he, a duck?
They're also webbed too. It's pretty cool. It's one of those things that's always been kind of weird on these Showa Gaijus, because he has 3 fingers and thumb, but only 3 toes.
Duck, duck, goose. That's all I can say.
But for the sculpt for his feet are done very good, where he has this really nice bone coloring here for the nails, and also on his hand sculpt. It's really good too, where you see that same coloring here for the top section of his nails. And he also has some decent detailing here for the under section of his palm as well. Then for the dorsal spines, even with the gap, are still sculpted very well, with a lot of really great details on the inside of the spines. You even get his tiny little spines on the front section here, so he has his 3 platings coming down to the course of his back, and then tapering off towards the base of the tail. And then the tail is also sculpted very well too, but sadly not as articulated as some of the other tails. But then again, the sculpt's very reminiscent of the film, with each of the little segmented sections here very accurate, and with his undersection of his tail being very smooth, where on the top section here you have that really nice scaled plating. And for his articulation, his head can look about that far up, about that far down. His head can look a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right. Can also swivel just ever so slightly, but not too much posability out of that. And then for his mouth, can move up and down.
He talks a lot.
Yeah, it's not super crazy. Like, that's about as far as he's roaring. That's about as far as he's closing. For his arm, that's about as far as it's going up. Doesn't really have too much forward and back motion from what I'm seeing. If you work the joint a little bit after popping it back off, you can get it to move up about that far, but it does have a decent amount of rotation though, so you can get it to go forward and about that far back. But pretty much moving it up and down isn't really a thing. There's a pretty good bend here at the elbows. Also has a little bit of a rotation back and forth. And the hand also has a little bit of a swivel to it and can rotate all the way around. For his chest, can move down about that far, up about that far. Can also rotate side to side. For his legs, can literally get him doing the splits, which is really cool. And can also go in about that far.
So you can do the Van Damme with 2 trucks?
Yes. Has a forward kick about that far, back kick about that far, bend at the knee, but not a huge one. Can also rotate ever so slightly at the knee, but you don't get too crazy. Also has a little bit of rotation here at the upper part of the thigh. Then for his feet, can move forward about that far, back about that far, and can rotate also side to side. Then for his tail, pretty much pose however you want.
Sounds weird.
It's actually pretty posable and actually holds its positioning really well too. Something that not all the Godzillas are capable of doing. So for a quick comparison, here we have the SH Monsterarts Godzilla 1964 compared next to my bootleg memorial box set Godzilla 1984 and my Bandai Creations GMK Godzilla. And here's some NECA Godzilla figures with the Godzilla 1984 and 94. NECA, you haven't made this one yet. Work on it. And here's some other SH Monsterarts figures that I think are a little bit more fitting with the Larva Mothra and Adult Mothra. So overall, the SH Monsterarts Godzilla 1964, I really enjoyed this figure overall. I think the sculpt on it's pretty good. The articulation could maybe be a little bit better compared to some of the other SH Monsterarts. But then again, I do like that the tail's fully posable, so that's always a bonus. But with the gapping on the back and some slight imperfections, I could easily say there's probably better 64s to pick up. And personally, out of the line, if you want to stick with SH Monsterarts, I would actually probably go with the Dusty version. Just because on your display case, it'll give it a little bit more variety where it's actually replicating a scene from the film. And it comes with an added breath effect.
I personally feel like this guy, I can only pose him one way. Just because of all of his imperfections are just in the right spots. Like where I can't feel like I can't put him sideways. His back would be sticking out, you know. The dorsal spines and everything, so I feel like I can only put him forward, like face him forward.
Yeah, for the most part, you'd have to be a pretty big fan of the 1964 suit to really want this action figure. While it's still cool that he's fully posable, definitely better options out there.
Definitely. How much was he?
I think when we got him, he was around 64.
Alright, so,
because of the year.
Alright, so like right now, like if that's still the price for it, it's not that bad.
I don't think so.
Go
That's how
figure.
much the 64 is. That's how much the Dusty is, though, which I'd just say you're better off getting.
Yeah, because it's just he's a good representation, but there's just way too many like faults to him.
Yeah, and there's just figures out there with better value. But what do you guys think? Do you guys own the SH Monsterarts Godzilla 1964? What's your favorite SH Monsterarts Godzilla figure? Or is NECA just more your thing? Please let us know in the comments. Well, a closer picture of this guy on Facebook, you want to click the link description below. Help us defeat those kaijus by hitting that like button. Subscribe, become a ranger today, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.